Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. I'm Meredith and I make sewing videos where I bring y'all along for all the crazy projects that I make. And for this project, I wanted to challenge myself to use beaded fabric, use feather trim, and to draft my own pattern. So this was definitely a big old project to take on, and it might be one of my favorites. So are you ready to see it? Let's sew. So for this project, like I said, I wanted to try and challenge myself to do a few new things, and using beaded fabric was one of them. And I've always been very intimidated by beaded fabric because it has to be prepped in a completely different way than regular fabric, but spoiler alert, it's really not as hard as you think it's gonna be. And second, I wanted to draft my own pattern using the Lutterlow system. Now originally I was going to film this as just a little short video for social media, but this project ended up being much larger than I originally anticipated, so I have some vertical footage of me explaining what the Lutterlow system is. Pass Meredith, take it away. So I have this Lutterlow system thing that I bought a long time ago. This is a pretty cool thing that is like a book of patterns. So it comes with all these patterns in it for a bunch of different kinds of garments. But the thing that's cool about this particular system and why I bought it in the first place is that obviously you can draft your own patterns from it, but it goes off of only one measurement. So you just take one measurement. For tops, it's your bust measurement. For bottoms, it's your hip measurement. And then they use what's called the golden rule to draft the patterns. So if you look at the back of the pattern pieces, like let me show you, I wanna use this top pattern, but then I wanna make it into a dress. So I'm gonna draft this pattern, but then switch it, make it longer, change the sleeve shape. So let me show you, when you look on here, these are the pattern pieces. So basically what you do is you take your bust measurement and then you lay this piece of paper down on another piece of paper, like a drafting paper or pattern paper or whatever. You put a little pin in the middle to hold it down, and then you measure from these points using your bust measurement, and this tells you how big the pattern piece should be. So I have had this for a while. I've never used this. I found out about this from With Wendy. If you don't follow her, she's absolutely amazing. She's on YouTube, makes really amazing sewing stuff. So I'm gonna try to draft a pattern from this. Hopefully it works. I've never tried it before. I'm very iffy about it actually fitting and looking right just based off of only one measurement, but we're gonna see how it goes. So first thing up on the chopping block was I had to make my pattern. So I don't normally make test garments. I'm very lazy and I just go for it and I make things without testing it out first. But because the fabric I was using was so much more expensive and complex than fabrics I normally use, I wanted to make sure the pattern was exactly right. This version is either the third or fourth that I made. I ended up making so many, but I did want to make one last change. So once I made that little middle seam a little bit smaller, I was ready to rock and roll. So I took that final test garment apart that I was happy with and I used that as my actual pattern. When I originally decided I wanted to make a garment using beaded fabric, I assumed that I would have to sew everything by hand, which I was prepared to do. But then after doing some Googling, I did find out that you can machine sew beaded fabric, but you have to break all of the beads along the seam allowance. So that's exactly what I did. So first, before I could start just breaking the beads and getting it ready to sew, I had to mark where the darts were gonna go, and I knew that I was gonna use a 1/2 inch seam allowance. So first, to mark the darts, I used just a regular needle and thread, and I used a contrasting thread color, and I just very lightly basted where those darts were gonna go. That way I could see exactly which beads I needed to break, and then I could just pull that thread out and it was ready to sew. And I knew that I wanted to do a 1/2 inch seam allowance, so I just eyeballed that. The fabric that I used also had sequins as well as beads, so if I were to go a little bit over where the seam allowance was, it still would be a little bit sparkly, so I wasn't super worried about being super precise. Now, when you're breaking these beads, you must, and I mean must, wear eye protection. I'm telling you, I was not expecting the beads to fly around the way that they did when I broke them, but glass was going everywhere, y'all. I'm dead serious. You have to cover your eyes. Something bad will happen if you don't. It's not worth the risk. Please wear eye protection. And once I was able to get all the beads smashed and get everything prepped, I just sewed everything completely like normal. The only thing I did decide to sew by hand is I did end up putting in the zipper, sewing that in by hand, because zippers are a weak point for me anyway, and I didn't want to run the risk of messing up that close to the end. So now that the dress is sewn, we could have stopped here, but like I said, I wanted to use some gorgeous feather trim. This is my first time using any sort of feather trim at all, and this is a 4-ply ostrich boa. And the way that it works is it has a cord inside of it. So one pro tip for you when you're applying a trim like this is don't try to put your needle through that internal cord. It's got a bunch of like adhesives and things on it to keep the feathers on, and it's really gonna gum up your thread and your needle. So you can really just loop the thread around periodically, and that's strong enough to hold it on. I really could not be happier with how this turned out. I'm really, really glad that I challenged myself to use materials I hadn't used before, challenged myself to make patterns in ways that I hadn't before. I will say, definitely 10 out of 10 recommend the Lutterloh system. I am a pattern addict. I have so many patterns, it's crazy, and I'm always trying to get more. And this is such an awesome resource. There's so many patterns, and they release new ones periodically, so you can go in and get new patterns, and they're very easy to alter. So 10 out of 10 recommend. And I hope that this video inspired you to try something new and to challenge yourself and get out of your comfort zone. Thanks so much, you guys. I'll see you next time.